and welcome to The Black Unconscious,
a mental health podcast about living, coping, and thriving while Black.
I'm Raquel Martin, a PhD candidate in medical and clinical psychology.
And I'm Dr. Justin Hopkins, a licensed clinical psychologist.
This podcast is not meant to be a substitute for a therapeutic relationship with a licensed therapist.
Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy the show. Hey, and welcome to The Black Unconscious. We are your hosts. I am Dr. Justin Hopkins.
And I'm Raquel Martin.
And we have a special mini episode for you guys today, featuring for our first time our Ask Us segment. Cue the applause. Where are the sound effects?
We don't have sound effects. We're low budget.
We're going to get them. So,
it's so cool. We got questions.
We do. We have a few questions. And so instead of shortening one of our other episodes and...
which we're not good at doing anyway.
No, we're both very long-winded.
We're very long-winded people.
I think it works, though, because we explain things thoroughly. I think we both do. Yeah. So, but we do want to have an extended dialogue about some of the questions that we got in. And so why don't we just jump right into it?
Justin's going to read the first one because it is about him.
It is. And I think, well, Raquel has shared that a few people have even asked her about this. Mm-hmm. And so, well, without further ado, here is the question.
I love it.
So it reads, I enjoy this podcast and I listen to it every week. I've heard so much information from Raquel during these podcasts regarding her upbringing, social circle, and work, but I have not heard the same from Dr. Hopkins. Does he plan on sharing these things about himself in the future? So, first of all, thank you for your question. And I really appreciate it.
And for tuning in every week. I appreciate it.
Definitely appreciate that. So that is an interesting question. And yeah, I think it's probably not hard to notice that there's a difference of style between Raquel and I. And I think mine
so nice to put it.
I don't do as much self-disclosure. That is not by accident. That is intentional. The way that I understand the therapeutic process and being a psychodynamic clinician is that it's actually helpful to know less about your therapist. Part of why therapy works is that you don't have a personal relationship with them prior to the therapy, and so they are a stranger. So the reason why that works is because we come to new people in our lives with old expectations and old ways of relating and bringing those into new relationships. And you actually get a chance to examine those in a way that can be really helpful, really insightful when you know a little bit less about your therapist. Now, that's not to say like I never self-disclose to my patients or I never say anything about myself to the people that I work with, but being someone who's in private practice and realizing that there will be patients or potential patients that are tuning in each week, I'm intentional to not give away too much about myself because I think it's actually more helpful for someone to know less about me and have less of a personal relationship with me when they see me as a therapist, because it allows for the therapeutic process to happen a little bit more organically. I'll share really quickly.
Ooh.
So I'll give a self-disclosure. So in my own therapy, and I will, so that's one disclosure there. I have had therapy in the past, and most therapists have, and it's encouraged.
Yeah, I currently have therapy.
Right, because you can't, I firmly believe you can't understand and appreciate all the nuances of the therapeutic process, not just the outcome and the benefits and the system reduction, but the actual process and the structure of the therapeutic dyad without having been in it yourself and understanding how certain defense mechanisms work and how certain visceral reactions are processed in therapy. You can't really appreciate that unless you've been in therapy. And so in my own therapy, once my therapist took off for a holiday, and she doesn't take off every single like holiday. It was a Monday federal holiday that she decided to take off, but this particular one happened to be Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And I wanted to know what she was doing that day. And I think had it been a different day, had it been like Labor Day or something like that, she might have told me. But she specifically didn't tell me that, knowing that I'm passionate about social justice, issues regarding race and gender and equality in this country.
She said that she didn't tell you that because of that?
Well, she actually, after I was upset at the fact that she did not tell me, she actually told me that I think it's actually important for us to kind of explore and think about like some of the thoughts and assumptions you may have about what I could be doing. And to understand
is she psychodynamic?
She is.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean...
Or is she a psychodynamic clinician?
Right. Absolutely. And so it allowed me to talk about both my... That gave me the opportunity to talk about what I imagined she could be doing, something that would align with my passion and passions for social advocacy and social justice, or if she was actually going to do something that was completely different, unrelated, or if she didn't care at all about the actual holiday or the things that concerned me. And so I got to explore both of those parts and how they related to other parts of other relationships that I've had and my own personal makeup. And now, if she had answered that question, right? If she had just told me what she was doing on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and, perhaps it would have been inconsequential, and it probably would have been, because that maybe those things would have come up in other opportunities as we continued to work. My own thoughts about whether she valued some of the things that I valued and things like that. But that was an opportunity for us to explore it then, and her decision to not disclose, knowing that the reason was for us to further explore and to further understand, and for me to gain better understanding about myself and some thoughts I had about her, was actually really, really useful and insightful. So all that to say, I generally err on the side of not disclosing as much, so I can have opportunities to explore things that may seem benign initially with some of my patients, but can lead to more in-depth and interesting things.
Yeah, and my disclosure is just with my personality anyway.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Well, are there? I mean, do you have other thoughts, or like what? Can you say like a little bit about like why it's your preference to self-disclose more?
Well, I also work with children, so
it's
a lot different.
And
teens, they're not gonna talk to me if they don't know me.
Right.
It breaks down the barriers. I always let them know like there's to a certain extent, but most of the time they just ask general questions like, I don't know what kind of music I listen to, where I'm from, especially when they hear me, talk, because they think I sound funny half the time. And then when I was working with individuals in the juvenile detention center, they had a real interest in my background, where I was from, because I really think they just thought I was soft. I'm gonna be real with you. Like, I really think they thought I couldn't understand where they were coming from. So I didn't have a and I don't think that should matter in the first place, but I just kind of just any way that I can help you open up a little bit more, I will do that. And plus, like, even just from the aspect of the podcast, I think one of the main reasons why I wanted to do the podcast, because I really wanted individuals to understand that like mental health clinicians are real people, and that we do have things that happen. And I do like the fact that some people reach out and say that they can identify with some of the things that I have said. So I do take it that way. And I'm also just like, I'm just a goofy person, man. I can't like, self-disclosure, this is going to come out, because like, just goofy sarcasm, all that, like that's just how it is. But just being able to work with children, I do find that people who work with children do get to have like just from where I'm at, because I could be totally wrong, people could be different, but do get the option to have just a little bit more self-disclosure, because children, they pull for more versus you work with adults in there, they probably just understand like, this man does not need to tell me like everything about himself, whereas kids are like, so where are you from? I'm like, excuse me, like, you got any kids? Are you married? How old are you? Yeah, I thought you were that old. Like, these are conversations I have had, and it's different with kids, and that's honestly that's the reason why I like working with them so much, because they're just like, children are just like magical beings who like sociocultural norms have not gotten to yet, and it's just always so fun working with them.
They're little people.
They're little people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they have all the, well, not all, but they have very similar like mental processes of that of adults.
Yeah, with none of the filter, which makes it even more fun. But I'm just like, that might be inappropriate to other people, so that could be why it's difficult for you, and you have like difficulty with authority figures because you genuinely see yourself on the same level, and that is not the case. So like,
right, what's repressed. What is repressed and hidden for an adult is on the surface or right beneath it for a child. And that's, But that's a really great question. I imagined that might have been on the minds of others as well. And it is actually intentional on my part. And while I do really, really enjoy connecting with you all via our social media apps and via your questions, I also do err on the side of being a little bit more reserved during self-disclosure. And that's something that I think every therapist decides on and tries to like moderate and figure out what works for them and how they work with their patients. So,
yeah. And also, I am going to read the next question, and you read the third question.
You got it.
Because we got 3. I'm just so freaking excited. So the next question says, can you talk about anxiety? What are the forms of anxiety? So yes, we are going to talk about anxiety, and we're just going to make a whole episode about it. So that's just a simple answer. Yeah.
Yeah. We're definitely going to talk about anxiety. I think people know a little bit more about depression.
Yeah. And I want to name it like, there's no such thing as a chill pill. No.
We'll keep
like,
workshopping.
Cause like chill pill, cause like anxiety, cause you get it. Cause it's like, I feel like if you got it, you would say this is the title, but whatever. That's okay.
That might have gone over my head.
Swing and a miss. Okay. Like, whatever.
We'll put that in the think tank.
Yeah. Also known as the garbage. Continue. Next.
So we're definitely going to have a whole episode.
I don't know. That's a good title.
coming up soon.
Okay. You read the third one.
Where's our next question?
Okay, you're not prepared. I'll read it. So okay, so this one says, as a white man, I listen to your podcast in order to better understand the people around me. What more can I do to relate to the Black community in a healthy way?
Wow, interesting.
So one, in addition to listening to us, I also feel like you should Google there's a video that talks about how a similar person asked this, but it was different because you're specifically asking how to relate. This person was asking because he felt like he was prejudiced and he wanted ways to combat it. And it's by Heather McGee, and she was on C-SPAN. So Heather,
right. She was live on the air.
Yeah, she was live on the air, and he questioned it. So it's not the same exact question because they were specifically talking about being prejudiced, and that isn't what you said. But Justin, you want to start?
Sure,
I don't know why I got so high pitched there.
Well, first of all, I think my initial reaction is one, like I think it's good that you're interested, because as when you're the person with the privilege, you don't have to care, right? That's part of the privilege.
That's the aspect
part
of the
part of the privilege. Like you don't have to care. Like most white people don't understand their whiteness because they don't have to think about their whiteness, because whiteness is a standard and the baseline. So actually being interested and thinking about
the quotes.
Yeah, well, it's true, right? When it's the norm, you don't have to think about it. It's just the air that you breathe. It's standard. It's assumed, so you don't consider it. So
kudos to even asking this question.
Right. So I think that's awesome. I think that is fair, right? To at least acknowledge, like, when you really don't have to. That's an aspect of privilege, that you don't have to think about race. In this day and age, it's becoming harder to, because I think we are making progress with the voices that are being raised that used to be stifled, and the things that are being captured in video in this social media era. So it's becoming harder to just stick your head in the sand. But still, with the way that white privilege works, you can get by in this country without actually having to consider whiteness or race much at all, and still do fairly well. I think in order to be a white person who is aware of these issues and is learning more and more about what whiteness is, what white privilege is, what racism is, what bias is, the number one thing that I think would be helpful, continuing to listen to Black voices, to the voices of people of color talk about their experience, for sure.
I think also acknowledging what you don't know, and also don't assume that. I think it's great to look at Black voices and stuff, but also don't assume that one experience is the same as other experiences. And you can get to know people in so many different dynamics. Like as a man, I never know how you guys make friends because it just
what's so funny?
hard.
I think a lot of men don't know how they make friends.
Yeah, so right. It just seems like incredibly difficult because I will legit just hang out with someone because I like their hair. And I'm just like, your hair is cute. That fro is amazing. Let's get food.
But speaking of that, right? Like I in thinking about my own privilege as a man, right? Because there is such a thing as male privilege. Right? And
yeah.
So
I'm sorry.
Right. Well, that was a rhetorical question. Like, obviously, there's a thing as male privilege, but like, I'm just kind of saying, like, when I think about my own male privilege and trying to understand that better, I think about I open my ears to the women that I know and do my own research and trying to understand the experience of another woman, and not to conflate gender and race, although at times they intersect. Obviously the struggles are different, not to compare or contrast, but in terms of like trying to look at your own privilege, I think it's really important to just be open to understanding its influence and its impact. Because when you're first learning about those things, it can really be shocking, like the benefits that privilege affords. And it was shocking for me to learn as a man the benefits that I have when I first learned about my own male privilege and how how women have to deal with certain things that I don't and never would have to. And so I would say just be able to take things in, be porous to people around you who know more about being a person of color and understanding it. It's not about you necessarily having to atone or apologize. Oftentimes when that happens, there's this thing called white guilt that starts to happen.
Oh my God.
And it's
and I'm not a fan.
Because
you're making someone make you feel comfortable for, so which is unnecessary. So I don't believe in that. And I think also another thing we said is don't generalize.
Right. I think white guilt is a thing. I think white people do feel guilty about.
Yeah, I'm sure they feel guilty, but when it comes
racism, if they're at the place in their lives where they think about it. But I think that is some of the internal work that I think some white folks have to do, because what can happen sometimes is when you become so upset or feel so guilty about how racism is, then that becomes the loudest thing in the room, like your upset feelings about the fact that racism is still a thing. So I would say continue to do like the internal work on yourself and processing whatever like feelings of guilt that you have or feelings of remorse that you may have about the privilege that you have inherited.
As well as don't generalize. And one of the ways you say how to engage in a healthy manner, one way is to treat like if you think of it as like, don't think of it as like if I met one Black person, I met all of them. If I met one Black person, I met one Black person. That's it. Like that's their experience. So don't generalize. Also, be sure to you listen to the podcast and you listen to like how we feel uncomfortable about certain situations. Don't put Black people in a bad situation. So if there's like, I don't even know how else to say this other than like don't do stupid shit with your Black friends, because we will get the brunt of it for real. Like don't like I don't want to say don't jaywalk, but like, everyone, if I don't know if you're younger or older, but there's certain situations that you really can't put people in, and you may not understand like the danger that will come to them as a result of it. You may not understand the way that they'll be the first person seen if it comes back to them, whether it's like college pranks or stuff like that. Like just don't put your Black friend in that situation.
I think that goes to like just recognizing your privilege, but also and realizing like the impact of like deprivilege. So if you and a person of color are doing something that's risky or that could result in consequences where authorities are involved, like there's one of you is way more likely to get into serious trouble and to be blamed than the other.
Because one of these is not like the other.
Right.
Which one doesn't fit? So I'm just saying, so just be mindful of that. I also think, and even in the video, she mentions like there are ways to meet people. Like if you...
The name of that video again?
Oh, it was with it was the C-SPAN video, and it was, I know her last name was McGee. I'm a big last name person. Heather McGee, McGhee, and she talks about meeting people through like volunteer organizations, or meeting them through like workout groups, or meeting them through like religious organization if you're religiously affiliated. But behaving in a healthy way is just to be open, and then there's nothing wrong with saying what you don't know. I never but just also don't take liberties. Like I know that you are, but you know, don't take liberties and don't try to like. Don't change the tone of your voice, like, because that's, you know, unhealthy. And don't like just take certain liberties, such as like, I don't know, possibly speaking in slang that you may not normally speak in because we can tell and it's offensive. Or I know this is for specifically like a white man, but as like a white woman, do not touch Black women's hair. And also, I understand that, like, you know, they never underestimate the surprise of someone when a Black person changed their hair, but like tone it down. Like we know we look nice, but it's just really not necessary to be like, you changed your hair. I had someone, you know, ask me if my hair shrunk, and it was because I wet my hair shrinks or whatever, but it was like a 20-minute conversation. So just, you know, don't make it so that like you have one Black friend and make it so like it's a token and you're like, I understand taking an interest in people's culture and stuff like that, but just don't overdo it. Just be who you are as a person, because we're people.
That kind of marveling can feel really objectifying.
Yeah, because it does feel objectifying. Like, oh my gosh, I never like just be who you are. And the fact that you're open about it, just say what you don't know. You know, don't be offensive. Don't use slurs. And then just be mindful of how we may feel comfortable or uncomfortable in a certain situation. Because if you've been listening to the podcast, you've heard of the things that go through our mind of being like the minority in a certain space. But thank you again for the question, because I really appreciate the question, and please send us more questions if you have any more.
Absolutely, please do. Can I say one last thing?
They're gonna think I beat you. Jesus. Yeah, go say one more. Make it quick though.
Well, I knew that was coming. So I'll just say real quick also, use your privilege to help promote equality. Use it well. Acknowledge that you have an upper hand in certain situations. Dr. What is it? Joy DeGruy? Do you remember that name, Raquel?
Joy DeGruy, who talks about post-traumatic slavery syndrome.
Yeah, she talks about post-traumatic slave syndrome, but she also shared a story of a woman who's half Black, half white.
When they're in the grocery store?
And they're at the grocery store. And another woman who is, I think they both might be, well, one woman who is Black, the other one was half Black, half white. But the half Black, half white woman looked very white. And so she used her
She was fair skinned.
She was very fair skinned. And she noticed that the Black woman was being mistreated at the grocery store. And she used her privilege to intervene on that woman's behalf and to bring attention to it. Because oftentimes when Black folks are mistreated, they, we feel conflicted about, we often do feel conflicted about like bringing it to someone's attention, because those concerns aren't often taken seriously. So, but the concerns of white people are almost always taken seriously, and that is a privilege. Mm-hmm. And so if you find an issue, or if you see something happening in someone's life, in a person of color's life,
or in policy, or in the grand scheme of things, align with us.
Use your voice and your privilege, the privilege that you have to garner attention in such an easier way, to be taken seriously, and to draw certain action out of your concern in a way that also benefits people of color. And that's what I think it really means to be an ally, to recognize your privilege and also use your privilege to promote equality when it's lacking.
Yeah, and just ensure that it is an actual issue. Don't start tripping and the Black person was like, I did not think that was a big deal. Now you're just tripping and bringing attention.
You'd want the person of color to take the lead on those kind of things.
Yeah, don't just start, because they'll just shake their head like, I can't take you to brunch ever. I can never take you to brunch. Like, why'd they get their mother freaking check? Because they got here first, Dan. Damn it. Like, that wasn't his name, but but it's just like, okay. Well, okay. That's it.
Well, thank you guys so much for your questions. We really look forward to hearing more from you all, so please
send
do
us
keep
more
sending
questions.
them in. And that's it for us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.